Thank you very much, Mr Chair. Mr Chair, I'd just like to comment in particular relating to the transitional provisions, comments made by both Carol Beaumont and Darian Fenton. And certainly if we look at individual employment agreements and how that's going to work, and whilst they're in writing, we know the EMA will be really busy pumping out those individual employment agreements to employers, as we saw in the 90s, as we saw when redundancy had to be referred to. Those agreements said quite clearly no redundancy compensation will be paid. So we know that in terms of these individual agreements, that it is going to be very much, as my colleagues have said, a take it or leave it situation. And I think that is what the National Party refers to in choice, as choice in this situation. Of course there's a choice, they say. We say workers will have no choice as to whether or not they accept this draconian you'll get sacked in the next 90 days, within the next 90 days, whether or not we give you a reason or whether there's not good reason, etc., etc. When we say that employees have no choice, then the government's response is, of course they have a choice. They can either take the job or leave the job. Now, what we say is that that is not a real choice, Mr Chair. And in fact, Carol Beaumont did touch on again a really possibly an unintended consequence, but I think from a transitional point of view, Mr Chair, is going to create a real problem in the future. And that would be along the lines, as Carol Beaumont said, that an employee gets a pumped up, take it or leave it, here's your employment agreement, handed to them, courtesy of the Employers Association, for which the employer pays a fee, and the employee knows they have no choice but to take it, and they sign up. Things might go really well. They work them, try and do the best possible job they can, and then they do the fatal mistake of too much sauce on the fish or whatever that may be, Mr Chair, and they are called in and said, well, the agreement which you have a copy of, you'll see quite clearly that we can sack you for any reason that you like, and the reason we're sacking you is because I'm not telling you why. We're just letting you go. I mean, this letting you go, what a funny term letting you go is, isn't it? It sounds like you're being really kind and nice. It's a nice thing to do. We're letting you go. Yeah. So this poor employee is let go, and then they think, oh, well, John Key's talked about job creation, so I'm sure there'll be a lot of jobs that we can find out there. And they search and search and search and search and search, and of course there's nothing, because this government hasn't created any jobs. And as previous speakers have said, most workers are staying in their jobs because they're too fearful to leave, because if they go to a new job, they're going to have these draconian conditions imposed on them, particularly when this bill goes through. So eventually they think, well, we're going to have to make ends meet, which is something we didn't want to do, we're going to have to go to work and income. And they're going to be asked by their case manager as to why they are no longer employed. And the case manager is going to say, and the employer's going to say, well, I don't know. The employer let me go. Well, was it your fault? Well, I don't know if it was my fault because the employer didn't tell me anything. And so you're going to have to wait. So that poor person is going to be waiting to see if they're eligible for a benefit, a very small benefit, but something to put a bit of food on the table while they're searching for these non-existent jobs. And I would ask the government to consider, where are the human rights in this? We could have the situation where the work and income case manager asks the employer if the person was justified, if it was their fault. And the employer will say to them, well, yes, it was their fault, because and will feel quite confident about telling them about the reasons, because they've got nothing to lose. So we have the ludicrous situation that this poor person who, through for complete reason unknown, has lost their job and are then told by Work and Income, Mr Chair, I'll take Keith Locke.